All right, y'all, welcome back for some more craziness and conspiracy theories, all right? But before we get to the madness, we got to unplug some more people out of the matrix, man. And you do that by spamming the like button and putting hashtag unplugged in the comment section. It's a lot of unplugged people in the comment section, bro, all right? And if you're new, hit that subscribe button. Let's get to the video.
Wall Street remains braced for a recession, eventually. That's in part because consumers are poised to slow down their spending.
March was really kind of a big month in terms of spending slowdown, but it's not just bad news. We're not seeing like things deteriorating at a really rapid pace, but the slowdown is there.
But a recession may never materialize if consumers keep spending.
I continue to think that it's possible that this time is really different. And the reason is there's just so much excess demand really in the labor market.
Stop raising the rates, pal. Golly, these interest rates are killing us, pal.
Market.
I mean, it's been amazing how resilient, in a way, the consumer has been to this inflationary shock.
The consumer is still very strong. They're just spending differently.
People are still spending, and that has been important to the economy.
We've been talking about the possibility of recession for what felt like, a very, very long time. And for now, the global economy is holding up.
But some people are reining in their budgets.
I don't like to save my money, and that was part of the problem. I like to spend money. I felt like a lot of people might have a similar experience, especially since we live in a consumer economy.
How much longer can consumers keep the U.S. economy afloat?
That's a good question.
Many Americans are reworking their budgets as inflation stays hot.
Last year I was living in Arizona, I was paying rent, and I was getting frustrated because my income it felt like it was disappearing. It felt like I wasn't making progress on my savings goals, and I felt like, how am I supposed to not be a renter if I can't save enough to not?
Welcome to the real world. Now you see how the rest of us were feeling and are feeling. You know what I mean, bro? Sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, fam. And it's not even, I know a lot of people be like, well, how do you budget your money? It ain't even that, man. Just the cost of living. It don't even just equal out. It don't balance out with what you gotta pay. Like, it's crazy.
Not be a renter anymore. So that was one of the contributing factors to me moving back home to California, where the income is actually higher and the cost of living is higher as well. But because I'm living at home, I'm saving on that.
The reality is that as prices are rising, the things that you have to pay for, the everyday expenses, your rent, your mortgage, your utilities, food, all of that is increasing, and increasing dramatically in some cases.
In a February 2023 survey, 4 out of 5 consumers said they were tightening budgets by buying less in bulk or shopping around more often for better deals. These sorts of
and a lot of people be like, oh, you need to eat healthy. Well, do you see how much it costs to eat healthy these days? Why do I want to do that?
Micro decisions have a huge influence on the pace of economic growth.
Consumer spending represents more than half of the economy. It's close to 70%. If consumer spending is strong, that alone is, generally speaking, enough to keep the economy from slipping into a recession.
In Europe, it's a little bit less. Exports are a much more important driver of economic activity than perhaps, say, here in the United States. And then we look at China and other parts of Asia, and again, the manufacturing base, much more important. So yes, the US is very much a standout in terms of the importance of the consumer to overall economic health.
The strong consumer spending may be keeping inflation hot. In March 2021, the headline inflation rate shot past the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Fast forward to April 2023, and inflation remained close to 5% annually. The escalating prices are only just beginning to slow people down.
Consumers still have the financial buffer. Even when spending is slowing, the process might be gradual because they still have money in their bank accounts.
At the end of 2023's first quarter, gross domestic product grew at 1.1%. While not negative, this growth isn't strong enough to rule out the possibility of a recession. Something is occurring underneath the hood here. People are shifting what they buy. People spent big on physical goods during lockdowns, but services are now commanding the strongest spend.
When you're looking at where spending is taking place, particularly as you're looking at travel and leisure and entertainment, that is a higher income consumer.
According to McKinsey,
I bet it is. You can't scroll through Instagram or Facebook or TikTok without somebody yelling or showing or some type of trip they just took. And they do that strategically, man, because they know some people don't need to be doing those trips right now. But you constantly seeing them in your face over and over again, you figure out a way to get to that destination you want to go to.
Many people remain ready to splurge on experiences. Spending in other categories like restaurants and apparel are up too, but so are absolute necessities.
I'm feeling it when it comes to food, which is so weird for me because I've never really concerned myself with how much food costs.
You know, what drives consumer spending? Well, it's either your income or your access to debt. Or you can run down your savings. This pressure from all three factors is going to make, even if we don't get a recession, it's going to be quite a painful economic period for many, many households in America.
Economists believe that people with less money may turn to credit to cover expenses in this economy.
I think it's really scary how much people are using credit to be able to afford what they need to have every day.
That sentiment shows up in this data set from the Bank of America Institute.
We care about credit utilization.
That's not good with the interest rates, bro.
Because we want to see how leveraged is a consumer, right? Are they really borrowing to finance their spending, or are they spending the money they already have?
Through the pandemic, Americans were using less credit, but that trend is starting to reverse. At the end of 2022, the average household had nearly $10,000 in credit card debt. Analysts believe that nationwide credit card debt may soon reach $1 trillion, an all-time high.
Putting everyday expenses on credit is so very dangerous because we know that as interest rates have been rising, so have rates on credit cards. So is the interest that you're paying on that money that you are indeed borrowing to pay for everyday expenses.
Scary.
Credit card interest rates have never been higher, topping 20% nationwide in February. These interest rates move up and down depending on the central bank's federal funds rate. And these rates are generally only charged to customers who carry a monthly balance. As consumers run into headwinds, other parts of the economy are flashing warning signs too.
There's been a lot of speculation since the recent failures of a couple of large banks. This could spark a reduction in credit.
You know, banks are becoming much more nervous. They've seen a bit of deposit flight in some of these small and regional banks. This combination of higher borrowing costs and reduced access to credit, this double pincer movement, if you like, on the household and the corporate sector of America is, I think, what could be really, really concerning and damaging for the growth prospects.
While the average consumer is doing well, the economy is split. This demand could be driven by strong growth in assets, particularly housing. In the US, home prices have risen nationwide by more than 30% since 2020. Roughly 2/3 of US households own a home. Economists believe that these house price increases can amplify spending.
If you do in fact have equity in your home, you may potentially be in the market for a home equity line of credit. This is the ability to borrow against your home value.
But there are risks of home equity lines of credit too, especially depending on the path of interest rates.
You have to keep in mind that you are indeed borrowing money here. And so there will be interest rates on this amount of money that you're borrowing. So it's something to consider, but to look at very carefully to make sure that you're still able to cover the cost of living in your home.
The Federal Reserve, for now, says those interest rates will stay higher for longer.
With today's action, we have raised interest rates by 5 percentage points in a little more than a year. We are seeing the effects of our policy tightening on demand. It will take time.
And then this past FOMC meeting, they just did another 25 basis points hike. So even though they seen some little bit of a small drop in inflation, they still raised. They're still trying to get ahead, and they still have that 2% goal. So listen, man, you gotta pay attention to what's going on. And like I said, interest rates are still going up, so you're still gonna feel it.
However, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized, especially on inflation.
When this rate's going up, it makes economic conditions tighter for everybody, especially people without assets.
It's been the most aggressive and rapid pace of interest rate increases for 40 years. We can all feel it in our pockets.
So I had this form up in my bio on my social media, and I said, hey, would you like a budget? Fill this out. I'll send you a budget. And over 200 people replied in the span of 3 days, which was completely overwhelming. No, I did not get to everybody. That was shocking, the amount of people that I was worried for.
Another factor may be weighing on Americans. The average tax refund in 2023 is lower than it was in 2022.
Wow.
This can affect the purchasing power of moderate income families.
But another positive sign for the lower income is that their wage level, their wage growth is still the highest among all income cohorts. And now if you think about the other side of income spectrum, the higher income folks, our data is showing that their wage levels are falling, right? What they're making in the paycheck right now might be smaller than a year ago, but they're not seeing so much of a drawdown in their bank savings because they presumably accumulate a lot of savings over the pandemic. So with these two factors combined, I think both ends of income spectrum are facing some headwind, but there's other counter factor that provides additional buffer to them.
Leading economists haven't declared a recession as of May 2023, but some do see early signs of a slowdown mounting.
I think if you view this post-COVID recovery as an era that has been elevating into the atmosphere, I think it's losing its energy now. It hasn't yet started to turn down, but I think it's clearly facing stronger headwinds now.
I think it's unlikely that we're currently in a recession, and probably the biggest reason for that is that the labor market is as strong as it is.
Many of those open jobs are in demanding industries like food and hospitality. The future path of the economy could depend on whether businesses can pay these workers a living wage.
From an incomes perspective, they're not as good as perhaps they were. You know, we had this period where income inequality perhaps shrunk, but now I fear that we are once again in the situation where those that have got the cash are in a much better position than those that are unfortunately struggling a little bit more.
I think many people are still living paycheck to paycheck. So this is not pain, financial pain that's only facing a few. It's facing the majority of Americans, regardless of how much money they're making.
Agreed.
To bring back our panel, Nick Pope works for the British government investigating UFOs, and Ben Hansen, also former FBI agent, now also investigates sightings. I want to start with you, Nick. You know, I've got a lot of friends and family who've been following our coverage for the last couple months who just say, look, like, until I can see the evidence for myself, until I can see pictures, they don't believe just, hearing people's stories.
I get that. I mean, I feel the same. But I mean, still, even in these days of forensics and DNA evidence, eyewitness testimony still lies at the heart of the criminal justice system. So we can, we must listen to that. But yeah, Congress is working to try and validate this. I was intrigued in the hearing where David Grush was very specific. And when he was asked, who do we need to get in the room? Who do we need to ask? Whether they're in agencies, corporations. He said, I will give you a list of hostile and friendly witnesses.
That was a good question.
It was a great question. Yeah. And he said he will do it after the hearing. I would love to see that list because that will tell us where to look for these programs.
Yep, and I've asked myself over and over again, I mean, why would these guys lie? I mean, with their history, top military officials, it just doesn't make sense that they would just suddenly make all this up. I want to...
Yeah, we still got to worry about the cover-up, though. I feel like this is going to be one of the biggest cover-ups aside from JFK or something like that, something similar to that. It's going to be up there with that.
Play a soundbite from the David Grush interview he did with us initially, something that was kind of alarming when he talks about the potential that these UAPs could actually be aggressive. We'll listen to it and then we'll talk about it.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
I mean, Ben, that's scary to hear. I mean,
yeah,
it's scary. Like, you almost don't want it to be true. I mean, is this something we've known? I mean,
because you don't even know what you're going up against.
Studying this for a long time, long before me. Is this something that we've known about?
Well, the problem is a lot of this is rumored that we can't document. And so if David Grush has information, it's going to be spectacular. But we can go back as far as what we call the red alert in D.C. in 52. Right, 2 weekends over July, these objects would show up and then scatter when they'd scramble jets. I have information I can't verify yet, but that we actually lost a jet that night. Now, even if they're not shooting them down, this is very dangerous. It's no game when you scramble jets, in a sortie to go after something because you're flying extreme speeds. That alone is dangerous. Right now, we're talking about that they might have actually been shot down. Burchett said he saw something that made him feel as if they had the weaponry to turn us into, I think he said, briquettes, or charcoal.
Yeah.
Right? So that automatically should make this a very serious issue. We need to know what the intentions of whoever they are.
What's this nuclear incident, Nick, that we hear people talking about? Was there an incident in a nuclear plant? The congressman kind of alluded to it.
It's long been claimed that there's a connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons, and there have been a series of incidents where there have been sightings over nuclear power plants, missile silos, and such like. And one of them in Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, a number of the missiles, when there was a UFO over the facility, apparently went offline. Well, whatever we think caused that, there will be a paper trail. And that's why it's so important. I mean, we heard questions about the Department of Energy. That's why it's important they're looped into this. It's also important that we get this information declassified. And of course, that's one of the things going forward that's going to be in Chuck Schumer's amendment to the new defense bill.
That's what I thought. I just brought this letter out again from George Knapp, which he put into the Congressional Record. He talks about this Advanced Weapons System Application Program. It's this secret program that apparently Harry Reid knew about. And he's saying, like, go back and get all those documents now, like that these Congress people need to go back and get the documents. I'm curious, Ben, you've been at a pilots conference, essentially, in Wisconsin for the last several days, talking to pilots. We had you on Banfield a couple of nights. What have you learned from me? Are more pilots coming forward with stories?
Absolutely. So I got there Wednesday, so right after the hearings happened in the morning. And we had a booth, and we had a line of people, several people deep. Every 5 minutes, I was getting reports from people, and some of them really extraordinary. I'm talking about stuff that I'm going to be talking to Ryan Graves this week. I'm going to be talking, hopefully, to Burchett. People that might become whistleblowers because some of these happened while they're on Navy ships. Some of these things happened with commercial pilots. Really extraordinary. I just need some time to vet the information because it's like drinking from a fire hose.
You've talked about the bipartisan support for this. How fast can you get something moved along here in Congress and then ultimately have that declassification process and reform happen?
It's like a glacier. I mean, we get fight every step of the way. But I think the American public, and here's what's going to happen. A few of the big shots in Congress are going to get a call from some of their donors saying, hey, let's get to the bottom of this. And then they're going to start getting interested. I've had so many congressmen put a bug in my ear saying, man, I've had, some of them have told me they've had sightings and they're afraid to say anything and they're glad we're doing it. So I think we're knocking the varnish off of it a little bit with this. Do I think, we're not going to bring you in a saucer or a little green man. That's not what it's going to be about. And I know y'all, every time you play this interview with one of us, you play the thing from X-Files. I get it. But the reality is the American public deserves to know. And you better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people.
Woo!
Because there's no telling what they'll pull on you.
Say that again. Say that again. Power is in the people, man. Say that again.
Get it. But the reality is the American public deserves to know. And you better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people. Because there's no telling what they'll pull on you. I'm sure Jared could say that a lot more eloquently, but...
I did earlier. But I want to give Tim a lot of credit going back to some of your questions, which is, this is a really simple hearing. It's about oversight.
I'm not a really simple guy. Is that what you're getting ready to say?
No, I wasn't going there. But it was really hard for him to get this scheduled. It was hard for him to get it scheduled. It was hard for Congressman Luna to get it scheduled. It was hard to get a room. It was hard to get staff on board. It was hard to get approval. Every single step that they had to go through to make this hearing happen next week, the witnesses, they were stonewalled, and they had to push and push and push. Again, if there's nothing...
And I don't want to say nobody took it serious, but you have hardcore evidence of these sightings, whether it be alien or not. It's still dealing with something that's unidentified that is a threat to us. Why is it so hard to talk about? Why? Anytime it's hard to talk about somebody, you start assuming, okay, well, then you're lying. It shouldn't be this difficult.
Nothing to talk about Why was it so difficult? And that, again, is
Thank
what
you.
breeds these theories and these concerns. And so I think the best thing that can happen, quite frankly, just to end this whole debate is just like, let's hear the testimony and let the government come forward and figure out what they have and share it with the American people.
Anybody else? One, yes, ma'am.
Can I clarify? Do you expect next week's hearing is the start of a series of hearings you guys are going to be allowed to have, or do you think this is like your one shot?
I think that it's probably going to be the start. What Representative Burchett, myself, and my colleagues behind me have realized is that ultimately, as elected members and being assigned to House oversight and accountability, we can conduct field hearings. And if we continue to get stonewalled, if we smell that they're giving us a bunch of BS, we are going to do the field hearings directly at those locations. And we're going to open it up to the press, because full transparency really is what we need in this situation. And ultimately, to piggyback off of what all my colleagues have said, the military, the Pentagon, the intelligence agency, they answer to the people and thus Congress. And so we are going to hold them accountable.
If there's one person who deserves a ton of credit for sparking recent interest in UFOs that led to the hearings, it is our next guest. Investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who broke the David Grush story right here on News Nation about 2 months ago. Ross joins us live now. It's always good to see you, Ross. First of all, I know you've got sources in Congress. What are your sources saying about the possibility of another UFO hearing?
Yes, well, good evening, Brian. Look, they're concerned. At the moment, we've got great momentum with what's been achieved with the hearing. There's significant media interest, and it's refreshing and quite lovely to see the bipartisan approach being made by different politicians on both sides of the House. But what I'm hearing is that for a public hearing to take place, which is a very different proposition from the private hearings in secure or sensitive compartmented information facilities, SCIFs, that have been taking place for the last 2 years, in order for that kind of public hearing to take place, an inquisitorial hearing where people are subpoenaed, called before a public committee and asked to give evidence under oath, including, hopefully, first-hand witnesses from the legacy program, it really does require the Senate Intelligence Committee, and particularly Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from New York, to step up and heed growing public opinion on this issue. I'm pretty confident she's certainly motivated to do that, but I'm aware that there's a significant pushback going on at the moment from the Defense Department and sections of the intelligence community who frankly do not want the sterilizing disinfectant of sunlight shone on some of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, tell me about this pushback, because it sounds like when you talk to Burchett or others, they say this is just the beginning, we're going to have more hearings. I mean, what are you hearing from your sources about the pushback? How does that work?
Well, Brian, as you'd know, David Grush has raised very serious allegations of possible criminality, certainly illegality, certainly misappropriation, if not fraudulent behaviour with government funds.
That's why I keep continuing to stress and say, and want to go on the record as saying, protect this man. Protect him.
The allegation is that essentially the wool has been pulled over the eye of Congress, that there have been lies told to oversight committees, that even potentially presidents have been misled. It really doesn't get much more serious than this. And that's why people like AOC, Tim Burchett, even Senator Marco Rubio are talking on both sides of the House about the importance of accountability, of restoring Congress's transparency and control and oversight over these programs, if they are real, to make sure that they fully comply with the congressional requirements. And the difficulty is there are people who are obviously responsible for this, who are presumably at very high positions in both the defence and intelligence community, and who also are very influential inside some of our biggest aerospace contractors. I've just had a conversation this morning with somebody who approached me on behalf of a witness, a potential witness from within the legacy program, somebody who purports to have direct knowledge of the very same program that David Grush is talking about. And they're asking my advice about how to approach. And frankly, one of the issues at the moment is that the Pentagon's UFO UAP Investigation Office, ARO, it's sending out a shocking signal. It doesn't have a phone number. It doesn't have an email address. It doesn't even have a website, and its Twitter page hasn't posted a tweet since the very first tweet it posted last year.
It's a really good point.
If this truly is an agency inside the Pentagon that's seriously interested in proactively investigating and hearing from witnesses, it's not sending that message out. And so I'm in the dilemma at the moment. Where do I send these poor people? And I'm encouraging them to consider going forward to either the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community or the Inspector General of the Defence Force, or to, frankly, just come forward to the Senate Intelligence Committee with the evidence they have.
Yeah, but it's scary because you don't know who's been compromised. So I know that's the way I would think if I have this information and want to come forward and come out and give it to the people. But I'm trying to decipher of who do I trust? Who's not been compromised?
Because I have to say, not a lot of people have a lot of faith in the current body that the Pentagon has entrusted and that Congress has mandated to do these kind of investigations.
Yeah, and we know that that firsthand whistleblowers are coming forward. I mean, David Grush mentioned it in his testimony that there was someone else with firsthand knowledge of a crash retrieval program who did go to the Inspector General with a document with testimony of what they saw. So there is more to come. Ross, incredible reporting. Thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
A real pleasure.